this whole slightly magical aspect where, like, by magic or the internet, everyone appears in the Tara Loka Tara cabin. It's like, no way, how did that happen? And we're interpenetrating. So all your bedrooms and front rooms are interpenetrating the Tara cabin, and the Tara cabin is interpenetrating your front rooms, and we're all reflecting each other like Indra's net. And there was us just thinking we were on Zoom. Okay, I think we'll start. I think we'll make a start. Yeah, so first of all, you can see the shrine in the Tara cabin has changed. So what we have on the shrine now is Amida Buddha, and this is a very, very well-known and beloved statue in Japan, and Kashinandi and Dhammakarunya have both been there and seen it in real life. And a lot of the images of Amida from the Pure Land tradition, well, they're very active. Very often Amida is standing or walking or turning. And you can see what he's doing here is he's turning and he's holding up, he's opening the door to the Pure Land, and he's turning to like call us. You know, there's this real sense of Amida turned towards each of us, like individually, that kind of discriminating wisdom of Amitabha, and reaching out to us and saying, look, it's this way, you know, I want to help, I'm going to hold the door for you. Yeah, so we've got that on the shrine, and then we've got Amitabha more in the Indo-Tibetan form beneath that. So just to say about the evenings, so to give you a bit of a heads up, we're going to be offering devotional evenings every evening. So tonight is going to be with Dhammakarunya. So we're going to have first a personal talk from Dhammakarunya about her connection with Pure Land, and then some devotion to Amitabha. Tomorrow night, we're going to have a puja in here in the Tara cabin, including some of the Tara Loka community, and that's going to be dedicated to Vairochana, the illuminator, who actually gets identified as being the same as Amida in the Pure Land tradition. And then as we go through the week, hopefully we'll have evenings dedicated to Kuan Yin, Maitreya, probably another one to Amitabha, I would imagine. But I'll try and tell you before we start, because it's like tonight it's going to be Amitabha, so you might want to do yourselves an Amitabha shrine. Do you see what I mean? So that you can kind of create that devotional atmosphere in your own space as well as online. Okay, right. So let's salute the three jewels, and we'll do that in unison. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dhammaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Okay, so the pattern of the mornings from now on will be fairly similar. And so how we're going to do it is first we're going to have a devotional start where we've saluted the shrine, and then we're sitting and we're hearing devotionally the words of the Tanisho for that day. And then we'll chant a mantra. We'll sit for a few minutes. Then I'll present the material for the day. Then we'll have a break, and then we'll meditate. So that's what it's going to look like. So just settling yourselves in whatever position you're going to take up. Whatever position will be conducive to receptivity for you. And including in that receptivity ourselves, this body, this mind at this moment. Just letting ourselves be however we are. Part 1 of the Tanisho. When the thought of saying the nembutsu erupts from deep within, having entrusted ourselves to the inconceivable power of Amida's vow which saves us, enabling us to be born in the Pure Land, we receive at that very moment the ultimate benefit of being grasped, never to be abandoned. Amida's primal vow does not discriminate between the young and old, good and evil. True entrusting alone is essential. The reason is that the vow is directed to the person burdened with the weight of karmic evil and burning with the flames of blind passion. Thus, in entrusting ourselves to the primal vow, no other form of good is necessary, for there is no good that surpasses the nembutsu, and evil need not be feared, for there is no evil which can obstruct the working of Amida's primal vow.
Om Amideva Hri. 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 Om
So just sitting for a few minutes. Okay, so now feel free to make yourselves comfy. I'm going to be talking for a while, so if you want to not look at the screen or you want to lie down or look out the window, you just sort yourself into whatever position is going to work for you. Yeah, particularly don't feel like you need to look at the screen if that's going to goggle your eyes out. Okay, so let's see where we go. I totally do have a plan, but I'm just telling you what's happening now. It's that I read that part of the Tanisho, and I love the Tanisho. You know, it's like, this is my heart practice. And I read it and my intellectual mind just goes, this is bananas. How can I expect anyone else possibly to take this even slightly seriously? Anyhow, so then I'm going, right, okay, now I've got to try and explain to everybody how to take this seriously. Is this going to work? So you will just have to be telling me later whether or not it's working. But just to say, if if you have a similar sort of response, which is just like, this is bonkers, actually, well, don't worry about it. Just like ride it out, and we'll see where we go. Because in a way, it's asking us. It's asking us to make a complete revolution in how we relate to ourselves, how we relate to the world, how we relate to spiritual practice, how we relate to Dharma. It is asking us to take all our assumptions and how we habitually behave in the world, and it's saying, ditch it, try something completely different. Okay. Yeah. So I'm just going to read it for us again. When the thought of saying the nembutsu erupts from deep within, having entrusted ourselves to the inconceivable power of Amida's vow which saves us, enabling us to be born in the Pure Land, we receive at that very moment the ultimate benefit of being grasped, never to be abandoned. Amida's primal vow does not discriminate between the young and old, good and evil. True entrusting alone is essential. The reason is that the vow is directed to the person burdened with the weight of karmic evil and burning with the flames of blind passion. Thus, in entrusting ourselves to the primal vow, no other form of good is necessary. For there is no good that surpasses the nembutsu, and evil need not be feared, for there is no evil which can obstruct the working of Amida's primal vow. Okay, so you could say that this first section of the Tanisho, it's like a pith summary of everything that Shimran is trying to put over. So this section includes everything that we are going to be looking at all week, okay? So strangely enough, we're not going to go into everything today. But I'm just going to start first off. Where shall I start first off? I'll start first off just with this phrase karmic evil, because that's a very likely one for us to go, ooh, I don't like that. So when he's talking about karmic evil, what Shimran means by that is spiritual ignorance, okay? So he's talking about us as conditioned karmic beings, how we are, how we behave, so strongly influenced and determined by what's happened to us, our choices across lifetimes. It's like we walk around with this idea that we're kind of, here's me and I'm making a choice in this moment. But actually so often what's happening is some bit of conditioning pops up and bang, we've done that reaction, whatever it is. So this is what he's talking about. He's talking about our karmic conditioned nature. So what he's not saying is everybody is evil. Okay, so it's just his language. And blind passion. This is the kleshas, the passions, the defilements, greed, hatred, aversion, pride, ignorance, all that sort of thing, that sort of mush of deluded emotionality that causes us suffering and others suffering. So I think where I want to start with this is just describing what I'm calling the key dynamic of Shin Buddhist practice. Okay, and we'll be coming back to this again and again, and we're also going to be focusing on this in the meditation. So how do we meditate like this? So this key dynamic of Shin Buddhism, it's holding two poles. It's holding two poles in our experience. So one is self. So it's us as limited, conditioned, karmic beings. And we're trying to practice the Dharma, we're making a pretty good fist of trying to practice the Dharma as limited karmic beings, and yet we are practicing the Dharma as limited karmic beings. Our practice is imperfect. We are still limited by conditions, by the defilements in our mind. And so from Shinran's point of view, this is where he just looks at himself and he just sees his own limitation. Okay, and we're going to be looking at this in more depth in a couple of days. And there's not a criticism of that, because he's sort of saying, he's talking about the person burdened with the weight of karmic evil and burning with the flames of blind passion. Well, that's not like you as a specially flawed person. It's just like, this is the situation. We're unenlightened. This is what it looks like, limitation. So there's a very deep compassion and kind of forgiveness with that. So it's like we're seeing ourselves very, very clearly, but it's not a problem. It's just like, yeah, that's how it is. Doesn't need to be a problem. Okay. So that's one half of the dynamic. We're kind of holding in our awareness us as karmic, limited beings. And then we've got the other half of the dynamic, which is amida, or other power. So this is where we go into like the limitless, our potential. Perhaps we go into this now. I was going to go into this a bit more later. So this is where he's talking about entrusting ourselves to the inconceivable power of Amida's vow, which saves us, enabling us to be born in the Pure Land. So what this is pointing at is we live in a universe where this is possible. It's like we can use whatever words for that potential that is woven into the nature of conditionality. We can use any words we like, but actually what we need to do is be in touch with what that is for us. So we might call that by the name of the Buddha or Bodhisattva we have a connection with. I live with somebody who the image of a tree is what connects them to that sort of transcendental connection, that transcendental reality, that rooted in the earth, reaching up to the sky. And for her, the image of the tree is what makes that connection for her. For me, it's my yidam, it's Maitreya. And we might call it the Buddha principle, we might call it Amida, we might call it Dharma Niyama processes, we might call it cosmic going for refuge, we might call it absolute bodhicitta. You know, these are all terms that Bhante has drawn out of the different strands of the whole Buddhist tradition. But basically, we are talking about this area of other power, this area that within conditionality, enlightenment is possible. And in a way, it's like, because it's woven into conditionality, we can't ever be separate from it. It's like other power is here. It's like right now. We can, you know, it's closer than our breath. It's closer than our bones. And this is what we can rely on, that we live in a universe where enlightenment is possible. And in fact, that whole nature of enlightenment being possible, it's like that part of conditionality wants us to get enlightened. That is what we are entrusting to. That is what we are orienting to. That is what we are aligning with. Okay. So Ratnaguna, in Great Faith, Great Wisdom, talks about this very beautifully. So what he says is, other power is motivation or volition that does not come from the self. We may therefore assume that it comes from somewhere else, from some other agency outside the self. But that would be a mistake. Other power is not other in that sense. It's not other than opposed to the self. If it was, it would still be operating within the mistaken notion of a duality of self and other, which would mean it was mundane. One way of understanding it is that it's other than the deluded mind, which sees things in terms of self and other. Other power is the way things are, open, free of mental constructs, without self or substantiality, impinging on a consciousness entranced by the notion of a fixed and separate self. So just to say all the longer quotes, I'll put them up on Padlet so you don't have to sort of desperately try and write anything down. So in this Tanisho verse, you know, it starts, when the thought of saying the nembutsu erupts from deep within. So it's not like kind of we think, oh yeah, I mean, and we might think, oh yes, I'd like to say the nembutsu, or I'd like to chant this mantra or something, you know, and that would be fine, you know. But it's more saying, this is erupting from the depths of our being, in a way, like this is our true nature. This is like who we really are, kind of saying, yes, align with me. This is the direction. This is the way to the limitless. It's like something, you know, we can think of it as like something is calling from outside of us, or we can think it that something is trying to awake from within us. And we can think of other power in both those ways. You know, it's called other power because generally that is the experience. You know, the experience is we identify with a very limited sense of me. You know, my mind is like this. I am used to these particular mental states. I'm used to this kind of small cardboard box of a mind. And then when that starts opening up, it's like we don't recognize it. It feels other. It feels different. It feels vast. It can feel quite scary. Yeah. So then we've got this term nembutsu, which we've already been using a bit. So nembutsu, so literally that's a Chinese translation of Buddhanu Smriti, or mindfulness of the Buddha, and then it gets translated into Chinese, and then the Japanese then get their language, their characters from China. So nen or nem means to meditate or remember. And the Japanese characters, I think this is rather beautiful. The first character is heart or mind. So there's no difference in Japanese either, heart or mind. And the second character is now. So heart or mind, now. And then butsu, Buddha. So then we've got the full nembutsu, which is Namo Amida Butsu, that we were hearing in that beautiful chant last night. So we've got Namo, meaning name, to take refuge, to think about, to greet, to recognise. And we've got Amida, measureless, as we've already seen. And Butsu, awakened. So we could translate Namo Amida Butsu as we recognise, revere or greet the Buddha's enlightenment that has no measure, no beginning or limit. So that's how Enrique translates that. Or we could translate it as, I call on the measureless Buddha. And you're just saying that again and again. I call on the measureless Buddha. I call on the measureless Buddha. So personally, I don't chant Namo Amida Butsu. I chant my Yidam's mantra. But when I chant my Yidam's mantra, for me, it has that meaning. It's like I'm calling. I'm calling on my Yidam. And it's like an act of relationship. It's like saying, here am I. Here am I. This limited, conditioned being, just as I am. I don't have to be different. I don't have to change. This is just what it is at the moment. This is true now. This is just me as I am at this moment. And I am calling. I am in relation to my Yidam. And I think it's very easy with, actually any of this, like mantra practice or visualization, going for refuge and prostration practice, sadhana, whatever it is. It's very easy to do it in a mode where we are trying to create a particular experience. And if we create the particular experience, we think we've done it. We've done it. And if we don't create the particular experience, we think we failed and we can't do it. So this is where this Shin dynamic is quite different. We are not looking for a particular experience. All we are doing is taking ourselves into relationship again and again and again. Us as limited beings coming into relation with what is not limited. And when we look at that in terms of non-duality, actually it's like oh dear, going too many ways at once. One direction at a time, Maiji City, one direction at a time. So Bhante says non-duality includes duality. So it's like, it's true. I am a deluded being. I completely believe I'm separate and I've got a fixed self, and here it's sat here. and I'm calling to my yidam, who is not present to me, or whatever it might be. And in a way, that's true. That's like relative truth. It's completely true. That is my perception. That is, duality is included. But then what is ultimately true, if I realise it, is that actually there isn't separation. And so all we have to do is stay in that relationship between us as limited being, just as we are, and the fact that limitlessness is present, is possible, is available. And all we're doing is coming back into that relation, back into that alignment. Now, where we're going to go next is to look at the 3 myths of the spiritual life, because I think they just give us a very, very good framework, and also a sort of map where we can see, I'm relating to this practice, or I'm relating to my Dharma life in this way now. Oh, do I want to relate like that? Do I want to try and choose a different way of relating? Because if I chant my mantra, or I'm doing any practice, or I'm imagining the Buddha, or any practice at all, say it's mantra practice. Say I'm doing a mantra practice where I think, if I chant my yidam's mantra, I'm going to get this result. Okay, that's perfectly valid, but I am in self-development model. Okay, so let's just go through what that is. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so there are these 3 myths, and it's like they're called, so this is from some talks by Subhuti from about 2003, 2004. But there was a retreat at Adhisthana recently on the 3 myths, and it's all online if anybody wants to look at it afterwards. And they're myths in the sense of a positive story, or a sort of positive way of framing practice and experience that opens us up. None of them are adequate to reality. None of them are literally true. Okay, and actually they contradict each other, as you'll see. So self-development. So the self-development myth, we'll all be really familiar with this one. So this is primarily how the Buddha teaches. It's primarily how Bhante teaches. It's primarily how the Triratna approach goes. This is like us, by our own efforts, we can make choices to change our minds. So this is us practicing meditation. So we're developing, if I sit down and I practice the mindfulness of breathing, my mindfulness will increase. If I sit down and I practice metta, my metta will grow. If I act skillfully in my life, if I take ethics and the precepts seriously, I'm making skillful choices, and that works on the karma niyama. It will change who I am. It will change how my mind arises in the future. So this is the model of the path. I take steps and I walk up the path by my own effort, and I keep changing myself, and eventually there's like me here, and I keep changing, and I get kinder and kinder and more metaphor, and I open up more and more, and I soften off my sense of self, and I reflect on the 3 lakshanas, and I do 6 element practice, and then my sense of self dissolves, and I become enlightened. Okay? So I am doing it by my own power. Okay? Is this all making sense? Good. It's always reassuring when people nod. Good. So this is any of the paths, the threefold path of ethics, meditation, and wisdom, the noble eightfold path, the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva path. Anything where we're thinking, I'm going to practice this, I'm going to change so that this can happen. And it's not that, it's not that I'm saying that this is wrong, okay? It's like all of the models are completely valid, and, and all of them will break down at a certain point. And Subhuti talks about how they have back sides and front sides. I mean, I like thinking about it as the bright side and the dark side. The dark side is where it all goes wrong. But the bright side of self-development is, it's sensible. It's like you can explain to somebody, oh, if you do this, that will happen. And they think, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I understand that. That's how I function in the world. Yeah, I can go with that. It's confidence inducing because it's like, you don't need any special ability, you just need to give it a go. And you put it, Bansi says, if you put in the effort, enlightenment is guaranteed. So, if we do this, that effect will happen. It's marvellous, fantastic, the self-development model. And I also think it is just necessary, like definitely at the start of one's spiritual life, or just, just in general, because actually it's very hard to get unstuck from our habits and our habits of mind to allow much space for anything else to emerge. If we don't consciously say, I need to put these conditions in place, I need to make these choices, I need to do this because that will happen. Oh, I won't do that because it has this effect on my mind if I do. In a way, if we don't start with that, probably not much else is going to happen. Okay. But then we go on to the dark side. So, what can happen with self-development? It's like we can get a bit stuck. So first there can be willfulness, which is kind of like we're trying to make ourselves be a different way to how we are. And the Dharma can just end up as this sort of endless self-improvement project, where it's like we're never good enough and we're always having to put in the 4 right efforts, and it doesn't matter how much effort we put in, somehow we're never as good as the person we're trying to be. And of course we're not, because we're trying to be Buddhas, and like strangely enough, like, well, I don't know about you, but I'm not a Buddha. So there can be this sense of, a sort of pervasive failure, like no matter how hard I try, I'm never good enough, and the failure is mine. Because if I tried hard enough, I could do this. Now, I'm not saying we have to go down this cul-de-sac if we're doing self-development. It's just like, it's a cul-de-sac, it's quite easy to go down. So what that can lead to is either despair and giving up, or, I don't know, just a bit of sense of disconnection from our practice, like enlightenment is somewhere else, or insight is somewhere else, or, it's never here because we're never doing it good enough. And it can also actually reinforce a sense of fixed and separate self. So if we feel we're succeeding and our Dharma life is all really, really smooth, we can, it's like, oh yes, well, I practice meditation every day and my life is so much easier, and there's a sense of I'm doing it. But actually, it's quite hard to dissolve a sense of self with a strong sense of self. At a certain point, it's like you're trying to fly by pulling on your own shoelaces. It's like, something else has to break in. Something else has to come into the mix. And it can also be quite easy to get into criticism of others, like, oh, well, I mean, I'm so much more mindful. I never lose my keys. But my friend over there, she's always losing her keys. If she just practiced mindfulness a bit more. Which again, obviously, is reinforcing our sense of self. Yeah. Okay, so that's around self-development. And if you wanted to encapsulate the self-development model in like one phrase, it would be, I can do it. Okay, I can do it. So then we'll go on to self-surrender. Guess which model I like. So we've got this self-surrender model. And so if self-development, if we're thinking that the model is path, I walk along the path. Self-surrender, the model is relationship. We are just staying in relation. That is what we're doing. So relationship are the power. And so if we're encapsulating this in one phrase, it would be, I can't do it. So you can see how they're contradictory. So everything that I've just been exploring around Shinran's approach. So I can't do it because I'm a bombu. I mean, I'm just like a deluded numpty. I'm just crashing around in samsara at the mercy of my conditioned volitions. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I think I just get a really visceral sense of this. It's like, I walk into the Tararoka kitchen, somebody says one harmless phrase, I've reacted before like a nanosecond is out, and then I look at it and I just go, who did that? It's just like this, the sense of ourselves as conditioned. How can a conditioned being rescue ourselves from conditionality? How does that work? So I can't do it. Instead, what can I do? I can open myself to the influence of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. I can receive their influence, and they grant me their wisdom and compassion. It's not mine. I haven't generated it. It's not come from this deluded mind. And it's granted to me. So this is Shinran's model. It's like we're entrusting to the compassion of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, like we're entrusting to a level of conditionality that is just trying to awaken. And it's like that's as much a part of us. It's like, we are part of conditionality. Conditionality, the Dharma Niyama processes, it's like they're just, given half a chance, they just want to unfold. Can we stay in relation to that? So this is Bhante and the Bodhisattva idea. And he's talking about this idea of adhisthana, or the spiritual influence of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So he says, the word bodhisattva refers not to an abstract concept, but to a spiritual reality. In other words, bodhisattvas do exist on some other level from the one we normally inhabit and experience. But what is the connection between these two worlds? What is the connection between ourselves and the bodhisattvas? After all, a bodhisattva by definition would want to have some sort of connection with us. Perhaps one could say that there is a sort of mutual tuning in. When you become aware of a bodhisattva, not in an abstract conceptual sense, but with your whole being, when you tune in to a bodhisattva, you are in contact with them, even if it is in a very subtle, attenuated, distant way. Something passes from them to you. What passes from a bodhisattva to you is what we have already referred to, translating the Tibetan expression as grace waves, also sometimes translated as blessing. The equivalent Sanskrit word is adhisthana. So this is what we're doing with the self-surrender model. It's like we're looking at ourselves as limited, and we're bringing our limited awareness, our limited consciousness into relation. We're mutually tuning in. I quite like that, how he talks about that. Yeah. What direction am I going to go now? Okay, I think I'll go in this direction. We live in a very nihilist culture, predominantly. It's a scientific materialist culture in which we've had a few centuries of sort of moving more and more and more towards the idea that if it can't be measured and scientifically described in a material sense, if it can't be sort of measured by an external instrument, it is not real. It does not exist. Okay? So we've got this sort of split where there's this real external world made of things and matter, and we can manipulate it and we can do things to it, and that is what will make the world a better place. And then we've got our internal experience, which is mind, psychology or whatever, and that has no real value or significance or meaning. So this is the model of a person as a machine. And my dad is was a research physicist, and he tells me about, he's now nearly 80, and he reflects upon his own death, and he does just say, oh well, I mean, it's just like a TV set when it's old. One day it's like all the lights will go out, and then that will be the end. And that's a nihilist, scientific materialist view of the nature of reality. That is not the dharmic nature of reality. Bhante says a world conceived of as dead is not a world in which enlightenment is possible. Okay? Now, largely we do not realise the level to which we are conditioned by that nihilist view. And what it does is it makes it very, very hard to take other power seriously. It makes it very hard to take adhisthana seriously. So, the number of order members that I've been on meditation retreats with, and then like we're chatting over lunch and maybe sadhana comes up and they say, oh, but I mean, it's just in my mind, I'm just imagining Tara. And actually, if we chant a mantra or we meditate on a transcendental figure, and we're within a nihilist idea, we're within a materialist universe that says, a Buddha or Bodhisattva, they're just a sort of psychological symbol to help me contact qualities of enlightenment. You know, it's not that you can't go somewhere with that, but actually, if we're thinking all we're doing is putting a pretty picture in our mind, actually it vitiates the whole practice. It kind of leaches the life out of it. So just notice, you know, are we a person that finds it hard to take it seriously? You know, as Bhante says, the word bodhisattva refers not to an abstract concept, but to a spiritual reality. In other words, bodhisattvas do exist on some other level from the one we normally inhabit and experience. You know, Shinran's talking about entrusting to Amida's primal vow, but you know, we could just think about well, could we entrust to a spiritual reality where bodhisattvas exist? You know, how would it feel if every time we sat to meditate, we are sitting to meditate in a world where we sit down and we are coming into relation with that spirituality, with that sense of an alive world which is sort of like pulsing with the possibility of enlightenment. You know, the bodhisattvas are just, you know, Vasantra talks about it's like rain on a car window. You know, as soon as you wind down the window, you get wet. That's what it's like. Can we sit in a world where actually we're just sitting down and experiencing the rain of the Bodhisattva's blessings? And there's a subtle, again, it's this difference between, it's just so important that we're not trying to manufacture an experience. It's more like we're sitting down and we're going, can I trust that actually that is a deeper truth about the nature of reality than my habitual scientific materialist view? We're just trusting again and again that actually that is true about the nature of reality. It's not that we're kind of sitting down and expecting there to be a kind of big bang and Amitabha appears or Tara appears. You know, that might occasionally happen on retreat or something like that, but that's not the practice. The practice is to sit with us as limited being in relation to a universe that is that amazing and is that wondrous. Okay, so strangely enough, there are some dark sides to this. So I think, I mean, bright sides. I mean, I just want to go woo. It just completely opens me up. But anyway, so it's existentially relaxing. It's like it does put us in a different place in ourselves. It gets us out of the way. You know, if I think I have to do it, actually, in a way, me having to do it gets in the way of me being able to be receptive. And yes, opens us to something way beyond a limited sense of self. But then the dark side, well, not applying effort where it would be useful. You know, you could just go, oh, well, I'm just going to rely on the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and not think, actually, do you know what? I just shouted at that person and there were conditions to do with that. And actually, do you know what? I don't want to do that again because it's going to really damage my relationships. You know, it's like there's a place for self-power, but just not in our relationship with the universe. But that could be a dark side. It can also just be a bit of a spiritual fantasy if we're not genuinely in touch with something. And on occasion, it doesn't necessarily encourage individual thought and reflection. Now, do you know what? I just don't think we've interacted. I just don't think we've got any problem with these, because it's like we're all so grounded in taking responsibility, in karma niyama, in confession practice and ethics, and yeah, I just feel like it's not going to go. It's not going to go in these really bad places. But actually, in the history of the Pure Land schools, it has. So you've got kind of suicide troops in Japan fighting to the death because they thought they were going to go to the Pure Land because they were dying for their temple. So it's like you can go to all the really, really bad places that the monotheistic religions go to. But I just don't think any of us are going to go there. But it would be, it would be a danger of literalism, taking this as very fixed and literal. And probably the danger for the self-surrender model for us is more like eternalism. So this is where we get literal about the myth of Amida, or where we think there is a fixed Buddha and he looks like this and he actually inhabits a place in space that's over there, and I'm here and I'm a sort of fixed self. And what it does is it just cuts us off from the dynamic nature of reality. So just as the self-development model, I can do it, I've got fixed self and I can change through time until I'm a Buddha, that doesn't match reality. Actually having an absolute idea of a Buddha over there and me here, that doesn't match reality either. All these concepts have to dissolve. Okay, and I'm just very, very briefly going to run us through the third model, which we're probably less involved with, which is self-discovery or immanence. And the model for this is like a mandala. So everything is here, everything is now. It's Vajrasattva's laugh in the middle of the mantra as we realise that we have been enlightened all the time. Nothing has been absent. Nothing needs doing. So this is the Buddha nature model, ourselves as potentially enlightened. So without effort, without needing to change anything, we can just trust that enlightenment will unfold. And so a classic practice with this would be just sitting. And again, it's sort of existentially relaxing and it's quite confidence inducing. And again, the dark side would be not applying effort where it would be useful. And also sort of just like drifting about in a vague and woolly manner. Yes. Okay. So that's run us through the three myths. And I think we'll leave it there and go and have a break.